that come out in an article that I posted last night. The article is called "The FAR Council Strikes Back: How the Latest FAR Rewrite Hurts Small Business Competition." 9 years ago, the FAR Council tried and failed to mandate consolidated contracting, but this time the mandate will go into effect. The article addresses the rewrites of FAR Part 8 and FAR Part 12. FAR Part 8 is the part of the FAR on required sources, and FAR Part 12 is the part of the FAR on commercial items. And in the article, I make the point that the FAR has tried to rewrite FAR Part 8 in the past. In 2016, the FAR Council issued a proposed rule to implement the Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative, or the FSSI. And at that time in 2016, the FAR Council said that they proposed to say that using the FSSI would be mandatory for government agencies when they were buying products that would be covered by the FSSI. Well, small businesses hated that idea. They sent in 78 comments to the FAR to oppose the mandate to use the FSSI. The FSSI was essentially a consolidated contracting method. And based on this vehement opposition from small businesses, the FAR Council had to withdraw that proposed rule. Well, fast forward now to the FAR overhaul, and once again, the FAR has put a preference in, actually a mandate for consolidated contracting. This time, instead of FSSI, it's called best in class. The FAR in this new FAR Part 8 has required that agencies use best in class contracts when the product they're buying is covered by a best in class contract. The difference from 9 years ago is because this overhaul is conducted based on an executive order, the FAR can immediately put this mandate into effect. Agencies are using something called the deviation to adopt these new FAR policies that they come out. There's not an opportunity at the beginning for small businesses to push back, to make these points about how the consolidated contracting is going to affect their business. So we're going to see within the next 30 days, most of the federal government moving to this new process of putting best-in-class contracts first. The result of this consolidation is you're going to cut down the number of small businesses that are eligible to work in prime contracts with the federal government. I have a chart in the article that shows that in 2024, there were over 60,000 small businesses that participated on prime contracts, but only 2,969 of them were on best-in-class contracts. So that's less than 5% of the total population of small businesses. If the government is going to mandate that you use best-in-class contracts, the number of small businesses that are going to be eligible for those contracts is fewer than 5% of the small businesses that are out there working on contracts right now. That's going to lead to less competition and more concentration of contracting with a select number of small businesses. Is that necessarily a bad thing? The FAR Council obviously believes that it's not necessarily a bad thing. You could potentially get better prices out of it. The businesses that are on those contracts are likely going to do very well. The average spending with a company that was on a best-in-class contract was over $8 million annually just through those best-in-class contracts. They might actually be getting more than that. So if you are part of the 5% of small businesses that are on these best-in-class contracts, this could be a very good thing. And it's also an opportunity for companies to partner with those small businesses on some of these larger contracts and larger orders. I pointed out one confusing aspect of the Part 8 rewrite, which is that this best-in-class mandate for using best-in-class contracts is not a statutory mandate. It is nowhere in legislation, nowhere in congressional law. The FAR rewrite was supposed to be focused on statutory requirements that are in law, but best-in-class doesn't exist in the law. And actually, I pointed out that when I was at SBA, I implemented the only law that mentions best-in-class contracts. And it's just a requirement to report to Congress on how small businesses are doing on the contracts. It's really just a data report to Congress. The best-in-class mandate is also not in any sort of executive order. It first appears in an OMB memo that it implements Executive Order number 14240 about consolidated contracting. OMB memos are not law either. So this FAR rewrite is really creating for the first time law that mandates best-in-class contracting. The end result of that, I predict, could be that there are more bid protests around this particular area of law. The trend in this FAR rewrite and other things that are coming out from FAR council members is to try to limit the availability of bid protests or try to increase thresholds for bid protests. But this one change, this best-in-class mandate, could actually increase the amount of bid protests because now there's a source of law. This FAR rewrite will eventually become a source of law that says that agencies have to use a best-in-class contract first. So that's another thing to look out for is if an agency comes out with a contract that's not on a best-in-class contract, that could be an opportunity for a company that is on a best-in-class contract to protest and say, actually, this should have gone to a best-in-class vehicle, and we're aggrieved because we're on this best-in-class vehicle. Did want to mention one thing about FAR Part 12. This was highly touted by the FAR Council members when it came out. The White House did a big press release about how this FAR overhaul is deregulating the federal acquisition regulation and making more opportunities for new entrants. And FAR Part 12 is a big change from how the government was buying before. The preference now is at least below $7.5 million. If it's commercially available product, the government should use commercial procedures. And those commercial procedures, first of all, use requests for quotations or RFQs rather than RFPs. So you're doing away with the sections L's and section M's, and now it's really just an RFQ that asks for quotes from service providers or contractors. It, in fact, could even use standing price quotations and unpriced purchase orders. The RFQs don't even have to have an evaluation plan in them. There's no requirement to score quotations or establish a competitive range. And at the end of the day, the agencies do not necessarily have to use debriefings. They can use something just called a brief explanation. So that could have a significant impact on bid protests or actions after the award is done. The point of the commercial contracting is, first of all, to speed up procurement, but also just to make the contracts more simple. You're going to have fewer clauses, and that means less flow downs, fewer flow downs for subcontractors, and the small businesses may be able to compete on the subcontracting side with fewer restrictions on getting into the government space in the first place. There is a cost there of some transparency, particularly with fewer debriefings and less ability to know how the government's going to evaluate your quotation once you put it in. Overall, that's probably going to speed things up and invite more companies into the space. But the bigger problem is when you take Part 8 and Part 12 all together, the consolidation effect of the best-in-class mandate will likely push out more businesses than would be invited in from the commercial items, and that's from the commercial contracting trend. So that's a big danger that we see with the potential for a decline in small business participation. It's an opportunity for small businesses to partner so that they can compete for these larger contracts, and maybe an opportunity to look at the mentor protege program. And definitely, if you can be one of those top 5% of contractors, the best in class contract, you're going to be looking at more opportunities in the future. I'll be working on follow-ups on this to look at some of the more data some additional data that might be relevant to this consolidation trend. And then certainly I'll be watching very closely as the FAR rewrite continues and the FAR comes out with new parts that are significant to small business. Thanks very much for reading, and thanks for joining.